Hello Propenomix people, and welcome to the channel. This is an article that I wrote for Property Investor News magazine in March 2024, titled Investment Choices in the Current Climate. Should you choose social? 2024 feels quite different to 2023 to the serious observer. Trends changing, rates and inflation under control. Definitely according to many, probably according to the more cautious of us. This month's topic is one that's been in flavour more and more over the past few years, although sometimes for the wrong reasons: social housing investment. The recent opportunities have been, effectively, unsecured rent-to-rent contracts, promising double-digit returns that are sometimes 20% or more. If it sounds too good to be true, you know the rest. Social housing is a Trojan horse here. If the underlying borrower is inherently dishonest, badly organised, a poor manager of risk, or anything else, this will all, of course, end in tears. The logic, though, is that a property can be sourced or rented and a 5-year contract or similar be agreed, sitting in between the property owner and the lessee, who may be a registered provider. And the difference between the two means that the numbers work and allow some profit also for the organiser, of course. Sounds great, but if you can't drive a truck through that, you should definitely consider brushing up on how to do due diligence. As so often, social housing investment was much more commercially viable some time back, and then was waning in commercial viability just as it was becoming more popular. Let me give you a quick whistle-stop of my own experience. I first let a property directly to a RP in 2014. I was seduced by the story of the social impact, and despite the fact that the monthly cash flow was going to be lower, I was very willing to give it a try. There were, of course, the other considerations of a lease arrangement versus direct management, and the time/headspace/ease argument too. I was very happy to give it a go. 10 years later, I still do some work with that provider. They've changed over the years, but who hasn't? Promises that were made now summarily broken, it's different these days, etc. And bad publicity for simply making too much money from housing, and also being somewhat tricky about the way in which they extract it from their community interest company vehicle. The feel-good side of it has gone largely for me in that relationship, although I do remind myself that the people being housed and the front-end providers of support that my team deal with are still the same, with the same needs or greater since the pandemic, and they are the ones who suffer from the removal of provision ultimately. I'm sure, however, they will find some more landlords and the properties are being repurposed for a different provider anyway, rather than being removed from the system. It has become a solely commercial arrangement in reality. Into those commercials, though, as well, the first property would have let at around £2,000 per month as an HMO, but with bills included, likely netting about £1,200 a month after costs of delivery had been factored in, including maintenance and all the rest. Instead, I let it to them for the princely sum of £725 per month on a 3-year arrangement, which is still running to this day, having been renewed twice at slightly higher rents. Of course, bear in mind that in 2014, LHA rates were frozen for 6 years, and then as at 2020 were up significantly but frozen again for 4 years this time, and the new 2024 rates start on the 1st of April. This has caused some, depending on the funding they access, exempt rents, etc., to have tighter budgets, of course. Not to be deterred, though, and feeling positive about the social impact side, I set off to look for houses where instead the £725-ish per month, which varied by council, remember this is 2014 East Midlands, was a rental uplift rather than a haircut. That made sense. The provider wanted more properties, and so there were some 3-bedroom properties available, which when converted into 4-bed minimos would attract a rent around £700 a month from the provider, rather than £475 a month from the private tenant at the time. Goodness, those were the days when a 3-bed was £475 a month. So I had social impact and commercial desirability. Today, that provider is now offering £900 per month, whereas the private market is not far off that, probably £850. That's only for rates from April 24 as well. For the past 4 years, it's been stuck at £750, as private rents have surpassed this in the marketplace. No need to convert to HMO, no higher insurance costs, no lending issues or premium on the mortgage rates for the tenant type or lease arrangement. Social impact can come at a cost, of course, and should in theory be lower margin, but that often isn't the case when you look at the profitability of housing associations. That single provider as well is not symptomatic of the entire sector. Many providers have accepted that they've had to change funding models or lobby local authorities a lot harder. LHA plus 35% or more, or market rents, have been in procurement processes since 2023 and the recent rent escalations. Those have managed to commercially stack up as long as they're with the right providers. Landlords who have let properties to these providers who are on older or variable mortgages, where they may or may not have been honest with the mortgagees about the tenancy type as well, have of course been screaming for rent increases as their mortgage rates have gone through the roof during 2023. So all is not lost by any stretch. Looking at the other side of the fence, many reading this will know how ridiculous the level of tenant demand is at the moment. We all know why. More people, fewer rental properties, squeezed margins, and a huge increase in the cost of holding property if you use leverage. This is across the board the case, social or not. Numbers are even more eye-popping for social than they are in the private sector, especially if we expand the umbrella to include temporary accommodation and the likes. Some local authorities are up 67% for their temporary accommodation requirements in the past 12 months, and there's worse to come. Section 21 abolition, amendment or whatever, wherever it ends up, does of course force the hands of some who have been considering eviction and want to still follow the least line of resistance to recover possession of properties with tenants who are causing antisocial behaviour issues, are abusive towards management staff, are habitually in arrears or similar. Better safe than sorry is the only rational approach for a landlord to take, of course. Throw in the fact that once an asylum application is approved, there is then 1 week to find a permanent tenancy and the applicant is off the Home Office books, and of course onto the local authorities books as they have the statutory duty to prevent homelessness. I would challenge anyone listening to this to find a tenancy, having been through the checks and moving within 7 days. Not allowed to go into one of your own properties because that would be cheating. It's simply a ridiculous and unrealistic timescale, of course. With a backlog of 70,000 applications cleared last year with 50,000 approved, that's another 50,000 that went into temporary accommodation most likely. Some will instead have gone sofa surfing, staying with friends or family if they have that network already in the UK, but you understand my point. It's impossible to have a rounded and sensible discussion about strategy this year without considering the likely change of government. What would Labour do when elected? Will they also freeze LHA rates again? You wouldn't think so, it's ideologically opposed to their core values. Will they be able to solve the housing crisis? Of course not. The pandemic has caused such significant disruption, migration, disposal of rental stock and a whole host of other problems, on top of a market that has been going the wrong way from a landlord and therefore from a tenant perspective for what's nearly a decade now. My intuition is not to assume their rise to power, although it is the overwhelming betting favourite. I will have to speculate on what useful strategy might be, however, and resultant tactics in the face of a Labour government. I'm already doing that and have been for some months. At a base level, social housing seems an area which should benefit from more funding. And if we have a centrist Labour Party, which we do under Starmer, as long as he lasts, there should be no major ideological blocker between public funding and private provision. Where the money comes from is an issue, of course. However, there is an argument that by cutting a lot of the budgets, don't think first round of cuts in 15-16, but third, fourth, fifth round, all that's done is move liabilities around spreadsheets, a bit like the 7 days to get a permanent tenancy. I have some sympathy with that argument and could see this getting through to the Commons without too much opposition, and certainly a credible financial case being put forward. In terms of real-time tactics, some repurposing, some agility, some open-mindedness will be the way forward once the election uncertainty is behind us. For me, social housing forms a cornerstone of my portfolio because of social impact and also diversification benefits. It keeps risks down and returns can be reasonable if done well. Overall, it is something to consider if you are not already involved in it.